Hey, budding lawyers, welcome to the podcast. Today we have with us Mr. Amish Agarwal. Hi, Amish.
Hi,
Yeah.
hi, hi, Prasanna. It's a pleasure to be here. My associate just dropped off a bunch of dry fruits, and I feel very, very grateful that we got such nice people working around here. That someone's got like dry fruits. They just went. They we went to a little beverage run downstairs, and they got like some cold coffee, some water. So it's good times, dude. Good times.
Yeah. So, is this because you are, on a podcast here on Budding Lawyers? They are taking so much
Yeah,
care of
yeah.
you.
Yeah, exactly. They said that this is like a big milestone in my career. I am there on a YouTube channel which has 15,000 subscribers. That is incredible. Hats off to you and the kind of incredible work you're putting in, Prasanna.
Thanks. Well, we just have subscribers. The viewership is not yet just building up. Let's see how it goes. Anyway, um, yeah, so Amish is a lawyer, Delhi-based lawyer. He's also an author of a book titled Seven Things Men Should Know Before Getting Married. So we'll talk about it later. And he is also very active. So probably many of the listeners must be knowing Amish through some of his videos. So he is very active on social media platforms where he shares his legal knowledge and his experiences as a lawyer. So, Amish, let's start with the social media thing only. I have seen many lawyers who make videos explaining some legal concepts, topics, but you are also making stuff like vlogs. How did it all start, and what's the purpose of it?
So, I mean, it's not much of a this thing to it. I've got a bunch of friends who are YouTubers and who are social media, say, influencers, if I can call them that. And they were the ones who, in fact, inspired me to get started with making videos in the first place. In fact, the people from Law Sikho, Ramanuj and Abhyuday, are close friends, and we've been close friends in the past almost 5-6 years now. And it's been almost, I think, 3 years since they were saying you should make video, you should write your content, you should do all of that, you should get online, get online, get online. And of course, there is always that resistance, which I'm sure even when you started out, you must have felt about putting yourself out there, putting your face in front of the camera and talking to people, and putting yourself out there for the world to judge you. And
Yeah,
because of that, it's always a very, it's a very scary thing. And I felt that fear equally as well. But it's just that I think around the middle of 2019, around a year and a half ago, I said, chuck it. I was trying to inspire a friend of mine to start her own, Instagram, YouTube channel. I said, you should make videos. She's like, you don't make any videos. Why are you telling me to make videos? And I said, all right, chuck it. I'll make a video. And I turned on my front camera of my phone. Did not have a tripod back then. I realized later that if you have a fan running in the background, it creates a lot of hissing noise, which is very
hmm.
unpleasant. So with that hissing noise, fan running in the background, I made one video which I had thought I should make perhaps a year prior. So I had
Hmm.
the content ready in my head, and the content of the video was, you know, airport laws that you should know about, which could land you in trouble. And I made a lot of video. I've made 100, 120, 30 videos after that. But the video that I'm the most proud of is the airport laws one, because that was the culmination of 3-4 years of experience of, dealing with criminal cases and different kind of things that happen. The statutes which are involved are the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act for obvious reason, Customs Act for obvious reason, Central Excise Act, things like Antiquities Act, where if you are perhaps, you've purchased some antiquity, some old archaeological significance thing, even that comes under the Antiquities Act, and then contravention of the Antiquities Act is an offense punishable under the Customs Act, and a bunch of other things. You know how a satellite phone is illegal. So if you're from another country where a satellite phone is legal and you're coming down to India, that satellite phone will be confiscated, but also you will also be arrested. There have been
Oh,
situations such as this, and there are situations where I remember this one case where an American fellow was traveling through India. He had some controlled substance, which was just his medication. He's a very old, 80-year-old fellow. But the moment he came arrested because he had no prescription for that controlled substance, or I think it was a psychotropic substance, became an offense under the NDPS Act. He was there for almost, I think, in custody for almost 3 or 4 months before his relatives were finally able to secure bail for him. So I started making my videos, and now I mean, I'm still making my videos off and on. I try to put out one video once every 2 to 4 days, and the and I've seen it happen so many times, Prasanna, that I'll make a video, I'll post it, and then people will tell me, oh, that's an amazing video. And then 2 days later, that same person will call me up and ask me a question which is answered exactly in the same video that I just posted. And so I realized that people see this fellow talking in English about the law and some topic, and they read the topic's name, but they don't understand what is being said in that topic, except maybe lawyers and law students, which were anyways not really intended as my target audience. Anyways, the target audience was people who don't understand the law and who would, by watching this video, try to avoid very common mistakes made by the general public. So when that used to happen, I used to feel, okay, so then the goal became, how do I simplify it as much as possible? Sometimes I do get technical, especially because if I don't get technical and if I give very, very brief stuff, there'll be a bunch of lawyers posting hate in the comments saying, oh, but what about this case? But what about that scenario? But what about this? So I have to give all the ifs and the buts, and this is what usually happens. And then when I start doing that again, it kind of just goes down. So kind of just to keep that thing going, keep to try to, and when I started making these videos, I also thought, okay, how do I increase the quality of the content? So I bought a better camera, I bought better stuff, and then I also thought, okay, how do I make it more aesthetic? So then I started a little bit of editing stuff as well. And then when I started editing, I realized I can play around with it a little as well. Then I started making, I've not made a lot of vlogs, just I think 2 or 3 of them. And even otherwise, I kind of make the videos a lot of times while I'm traveling, I'm going here and there, or I make it in front of courts, and that kind of itself is like a vlogging setup kind of a thing. But that's more because I don't have time to do it otherwise. It's not like I have time, so I could sit in my office and make it. I would rather that, all right, I mean, I am going to be sitting in my car, and I am going to spend a lot of time in court. So I might as well just, carry my camera along. And then, while we are there, while we have some time, I'm just done with the matter and now I'm free. But I know for a fact that the moment I reach my office or my chamber, I have a lot of work to catch up on. So I'd rather just whip out that camera and then just make a little video. Plus, another thing is that lighting, as you also know, is a huge issue, right? To set it up, to adjust it, to see how good you are, and all of that is a huge headache. And I absolutely hate setting up this video vlogging, whatever nonsense. What I prefer is instead just, start your camera and then just start shooting. And therefore, natural sunlight is a beautiful way to kind of get over that headache. So I just whip out my camera and boom, I start and that kind of becomes like a vlog in itself. But a huge challenge then is how to deal with all the noise that creeps in when you are outside, which I'm sure you must have also seen. When you're outside, there's hissing noises, pollution, honks, whatnot. Solution was to buy a decent microphone, which kind of is very unidirectional, focuses just on your voice, is able to block to a huge extent. And so when that was sorted, I said, all right, this is working out fine. So I think the reason why I do vlogging, to answer your question, is to save time, so that I don't have to set it up inside my house, inside my house or my office or my chamber. That's the biggest reason why I do the vlogging kind of a thing. But it's also fun, because I realized that a lot of law students who are from out of station, who come and intern with me, or lawyers who come to Delhi and they kind of want to figure it out, or people who are sitting in other cities, they don't know how it is like in Delhi, right? I mean, it's the same for you and me. When we don't know a new place and we want to explore it, especially, being lawyers, it's, there's that affinity towards the local courts. So I would love it if someone could perhaps make a video, giving like a tour of a place, like say perhaps the High Court of I mean, whichever high courts I have not been to, right? So that's what I try to kind of do from time to time, show like my office, show the courts, show how the system is being so what all is there. And also thereby kind of introducing people into the life of a lawyer, which people like quite a bit, and I'm grateful for that. So it
Yeah.
works for everybody.
Actually, this is also one of the things which is in my mind. I want to go throughout, like visiting different types. There are so many types of courts, even lawyers don't know.
Yeah,
And in that particular district only, that there will be so many
yeah,
types of courts, even lawyers. So I just want to, I am planning to make such videos where, history of courts. Like for example, Tees Hazari, when we talk about Delhi,
yeah,
it has a like long history and people don't know about it.
yeah.
So this is some of my plans. Don't know when I'll do it.
And
Let's
it's a
see.
fantastic idea. I might join you on your adventures, Prasanna. If you're
Sure, sure,
traveling
sure.
like we do like a cross country run where the two of us get in like a small minivan, and then we like drive across the country, visiting the high courts everywhere, and then perhaps we'll also start interviewing the local lawyers over there. And I for one will definitely benefit hugely because of that, because wherever I go and I say I'm in Delhi, they'll ask me if I'd work in the Supreme Court, and I say yes. I get a bunch of matters referred to me in the Supreme Court as well. That's one major benefit of traveling wherever you go, right? You'll always have like clients coming in from those places if you live in Delhi, wherever you travel. In fact, I know a couple of advocates on record who tell me that they make it a point, at least pre-pandemic, they would make it a point to travel to new high courts every weekend so that they could, meet lawyers over there, sit them down, treat them to food and alcohol so that the lawyers would then refer them matters. And that's one way to, I guess, acquire clients.
Yeah.
Another one is that there'll be lawyers who will be the president or the vice president of their local resident welfare association, and because of that they'll have a lot of people coming to them all the time.
Hmm.
I just yesterday I bumped into an old friend who's a lawyer who told me that during the pandemic uh, you know his income as a lawyer completely dried up. So then he started going and working with his father in his business as a small side hustle kind of a thing. And he told me he got multiple recovery suits and people as clients because of the fact that he would sit with his father, and people would ask him, Acha, what are you up to? And he would say, I'm a lawyer and I'm also helping out my father with his business. So people would come to him with cases of theirs. So that's another nice way to kind of
Yeah.
make your make your living.
It's
Yeah,
just another way if we look out a way of networking in a sense.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, but you said that these things are fine, like vlogs and all. But when you started, did you have a plan? Like, do you like purpose, fixed purpose? Like, these are the things you want to do, and you want to achieve it within so many months or years, and then you will do this, that. You know, something like that, which
Prasanna,
you
literally
usually.
nothing. I told you the story. This is literally how I started. Like friends used to tell me, then this friend said, Don't tell me to shoot videos. You never made, shot a video."
Yeah.
And then I thought, all right,
So
chuck it.
once
Let me make a
once you
video.
started making videos, then.
Even when I started, I think it was more about fulfilling my own narcissism than anything else. It was just about me standing in front of a camera, getting over my fear of public speaking, and getting rid of my fear of my persona of being an introvert.
Hmm.
So I think it was just about that. But then now it's kind of grown out. I'm definitely much more comfortable in my own skin because of making videos, and I'm quite grateful for that. But I think apart from that, it's just a way of kind of um, consolidating my own thoughts. So I try my best not to talk about sections or judgments or the boring mundane stuff that everybody likes to talk about. I'd rather, for me, it's always about the conversations that I'm having with my clients and the conversations that I'm having with my associates or my interns. Those are the kind of conversations I want to put on a video. I don't want to be saying that in the the Honorable Supreme Court in the matter of A versus B, AIR, SC 1990, AB 625 said that blah 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 blah. Dude, everyone knows that. You do a Google search, you'll find that. What I'd rather talk about is stuff like, okay, if you appear, if you go to the Supreme Court, there'll be a two-judge bench, right?
Hmm.
And stuff like stuff that nobody will ever talk about. Stuff like, by when you start out your practice, if you are polite and you are, a little um mild, so to say, meek, I would say, if you're a little polite, a little meek, district court advocate, they will chew you up. You
Hmm.
won't be able to get out 5 words before they start screaming and shouting you down, and the judge will say, all right, and they'll hear the other side, and then they'll pass their order. So you need to kind of really get that wild lion inside you going, and then scream and shout. But at the same time, like, again, nobody talks about the fact that if you take that same roaring lion and you take it to the Supreme Court like I did, and the judge will shut you down, and the judge will grant the other side the opportunity to being heard. So these are little nuances that nobody talks about.
Hmm.
But again, this is stuff that you need to know if you want to practice law, or if you are a law student right now, or even if you have a case, right? Stuff like how to choose your lawyer, stuff like you know uh, what kind of mistakes you'll make while hiring a lawyer, or basic stuff that everyone should know about, but unfortunately a lot of lawyers don't know about. So if someone watches this video and then understands enough that what his lawyer is telling him is perhaps not the right answer, or not the right way to go about things,
Hmm. Hmm.
good enough. And I think the biggest thing is always like, why to make it, or plan. I have no plans. Yeah.
Hmm.
I have absolutely no idea. I just keep kind of going with the flow. That's what it's always been about. And for me, it was very easy to go with the flow because my only investment in my, so to say, like YouTube career was that I bought a tripod for, I think, I bought a ring light and a tripod for, I think, 1,200 rupees. I bought a mic for, I think, 700-800 rupees, and that was it. And I would use my phone to record these videos for almost a year and a half. And so it was not really much of a this thing, but it's nice. It's nice. Just today in the morning, family friend,
Hmm.
uh, it was very very funny. A family friend told me that he was at Gurgaon courts and he saw another lawyer. He saw a young lawyer uh, watching one of my videos on his phone,
Hmm.
and it was, I think, what the family friend was saying was that he was kind of watching my video as like a state pump. He just wanted to kind of feel good, right?
Hmm.
And then so he's like, yeah, okay, this, and then he kind of walks inside the courtroom. And this is literally what my family has. So he said that it was kind of a motivational speech kind of a thing for him, and he saw this video of yours, and then he walked inside. So it's nice. A lot of people come up to me and tell me that they learn a couple of good things, and then that they take inspiration. I mean, I that's the thing. You ask anybody who's doing anything, and okay, you're doing this stuff. They say, dude, I mean, I literally, what do I say? Like, what is there that I am doing that you would know, or that that is not out there anyways. But I think, at a certain level, I try to kind of keep myself as vulnerable as possible and talk about stuff um, without any filters. That's a huge challenge, of course. A lot of times you have to talk, like, you talk about stuff which kind of, you know uh, it's not really in the most conducive to you, and I still spit it out. And it is what it is. That's how it goes. No plans, no strategies.
Okay. So you still use that the equipment which you were using before, like that one tripod. You bought a new camera, you said, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and the
yeah.
ring light. That's it.
I bought a I bought a pretty decent camera recently. I think around 4 5 months ago. The ring light is still there. I use it from time to time, but now, as I told you, I prefer the direct, like, sunlight better.
Hmm.
Um, but I bought a Sony A6100, and it's pretty nice. I mean, again, I to be honest, I was like, okay, it is what it is. But all my friends kept saying, you gotta buy the Sony Alpha. You gotta buy the Sony Alpha. So I said, all right, I'll go and buy the Sony Alpha. Bought the Sony Alpha. maybe like a 20-30% kind of a 20% difference, I think, between the phone camera and the DSLR. And but the mics were a big thing, like uh, I don't know what mic you use, but for the longest time I used this Boya mic, lavalier. Amazing
Mm-hmm.
voice. But then I kind of want a little more, so I got a shotgun mic so that I could mount it on top of the phone or the on top of the camera, so that I can kind of shoot outside on outside courts and while driving and stuff like that. And then everyone kept saying that online, everyone on YouTube kept saying that there's this amazing mic. And I just thought, all right, like I went and bought it, and I think it's so expensive. I mean, it's pretty good. It's pretty good, but it's too expensive, man. Like, it's like, what the hell was I thinking? I mean, what the hell is I thinking? And then I bought another mic. I bought a USB podcast mic, the Blue Yeti, which is very, very famous
Yeah,
for
very
the
popular.
podcast. And yes, then I bought this. So that was also not that expensive, but this other one was like even more expensive. And this was just like, again, on camera. You know, the voice is pretty good though. Like I mean, I don't think I have a great voice, but I'm like, dude, because of this mic, the it just sounds deeper, more intense. Sounds like
Mm-hmm.
a. So I'm like, take care. Ab kar liya hai, so now there's more of an incentive to make videos, right? In
Yeah,
fact,
yeah,
I
exactly.
carry these. Yeah, I mean, every day I pack my stuff. I pack my laptop and like my chargers and everything. I also throw in the camera and the mic, because I say, just in case inspiration strikes, or just in case something happens, let me also like pull out the camera and the microphone, and perhaps we can make a video here or a video there. Because trust me, even making those videos is not an easy task. The problem is that there's always this thing that, acha, what more do you talk about, right? Like, what more do you talk about?
Mm.
I've made a god damn, man, I've made I think 120 videos or so, 120, 130 videos. And it's literally like I've said everything. Now it's just a matter of kind of repeating whatever I've said in different contexts, stuff like that. But still try to keep it interesting.
Yeah.
So let's see how far I'm
something
going to be
I
able to.
something I can relate to because
Yeah.
even I've crossed around 100 videos, and I was after some time around 70, 80 videos, I was like, whatever I knew and whatever I wanted to share, I've already shared. So what now?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff which people like I wanted to convey. So how to get
Yeah.
to the right sources, like other lawyers who know about it. So that's why I started with this thing. And to be honest, to answer that question which you asked before, I don't have a mic yet. I haven't purchased it.
Achha.
So I'm using
Okay.
this Bluetooth earphone microphone only, which is attached to it.
Yeah.
And when I was making videos, like the videos I started with, the lavalier one, around I think 150 or 200 rupees, that is. Yeah, that works perfect. And
Dude, you gotta try Boya. You gotta try Boya. Boya is a little more expensive. It's around 700-800 rupees. But my goodness, I mean, I bought I bought a I bought this DAT D3 V Mic Pro for 15,000. Okay,
oh,
and I think there is just a 10% difference between the 700-800 rupees Boya lavalier
mhm.
and the DAT D3. Just like a 10% difference. The Boya is amazing. If you want to, like, if you're sitting in one place and you're making videos, no doubt, Boya is, in fact, it's far better than the 150 rupees lavalier. So that's something that you should definitely kind of, I think
Okay.
you should invest in.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
I am planning actually to now invest in a mic since
Awesome, dude.
I I've started this. I also have another
Hmm.
podcast, so yeah, it will be helpful. Anyway,
Fantastic.
okay. So apart, like you told us, how you record videos, like how you like go about things. But apart from that, you obviously have a lot of work. You are a lawyer, practicing lawyer. So can you take us through your usual day of work? Like what exactly happens like throughout the day in your life?
There's nothing fixed in stone, and especially as a young single lawyer, there's always a lot of um, a lot of responsibility is not just to work but also to yourself that you have to kind of commit to. Otherwise, as in like most married men and women who are lawyers, they have a very, like a much more fixed kind of a schedule, because at the end of the day you have to report back to the to the spouse.
Hmm. Hmm.
As a, I mean, I'm single, so I kind of just like, and do my thing. Of course, a lot of days are spent with just work and nothing else, but there are also days where, especially as an independent practitioner, you know I'm not so saturated with work that I'm working from the morning till the night, every single day and every single night. Some days, yes, it's quite, quite this thing, but a lot of other times, so if I, and again, there's no like fixed time for waking up or something, because there'll be nights where I'll have barely slept like 2 3 hours, and I'm waking up and I'm trying to like finish off this work which needs to be urgently done, or I have to prepare for arguments for this high stakes matter which is going to there are a lot of consequences attached to it. And that is why, things are not really ever fixed. But I think one thing would definitely, you know especially a couple of years down there in your career, when you have associates of your own and when interns start coming, is you have to be, no matter, even if you've slept for 1 hour, you
Hmm.
have to be up at say maybe 9:30 or so, because that's the time that the associates and the interns start coming in. And then you have to be there if you have matters. Of course, courts everywhere across the country either start at 9:30 or 10 or 10:30 in the morning. And so you kind of want to be there to ensure that your matters are being kind of taken care of. And then litigation, most days, you wrap up your matter. There are a lot of days where court sits at 10, my matter's over by 10:30,
Hmm.
and then I've got nothing else to do. So if I've got drafting or research or something, that of course I can do while I'm sitting at home or in the middle of things, or between things as well. But so today, for example, I'm sitting in my chamber right now. Um, my matter was effectively 15th before this High Court judge in the Delhi High Court. And the client also came, because I wanted the client to be present while this matter was being disposed of, or matter was being heard. And we literally spent 6.5 hours waiting for our matter and doing nothing else, because of course, the matter was there. Of course, I did go a couple of times to grab some coffee, to grab some food with the client during lunchtime. And then after that, I'm done for the day. I've got a couple of other things. I've got like one or two, I've got a bunch of clients to call. I've got a couple of people who wanted some advice to call up. But apart from that, it's more or less like a free evening, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You can see I have got the associates sitting over there,
Hmm.
discussing some stuff, most probably, uh, you know, some gossip among themselves. That's how work is, right?
Yeah.
Once at least the hearings are over, and once there is no drafting or any research work to be done. Yeah, that's how the day goes. And a lot of nights, of course, are spent late in the night, uh, just kind of researching, drafting again. And sometimes, you know sometimes you get up in the middle of the night because you're worried about some argument that you need to research on further, or there's some document that you realize that was there, and you have to change your strategy accordingly. So I think that's there everywhere.
That exhibit is missing. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's there everywhere. I think medicine, accountants, all professionals have to kind of go through that kind of a thing, which I think is fine. I mean, um, it's all business owners endure a huge amount of risk, far bigger than people like you and me, right? So I think having a flexible kind of a life is all right. I do wish that I could take out a little more time to spend with my loved ones. That is definitely something that I kind of miss, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to kind of have a little better work life balance in the near future. Let's see.
Hmm. Hmm.
You never know.
Also, you said that you waited for around 6.5 hours for a matter, but was that matter called out finally?
So literally, I mean, mine was the next one, which was supposed to be heard, but then was supposed to be adjourned, and then the counsel for the other side mentioned the matter, and said this, and then I also jumped in. I was about to shut down my laptop, say, "All right, the judge is about to get up," and then the other side launched into this. My lord, this there is there. So then I logged in and I unmuted myself in the virtual hearing, and then I made my submissions and the matter was disposed of. And to think, man, I mean, 6.5 hours spent, and I kept postponing 3 or 4 calls as well as 1 or 2 meetings. That, acha, let me just get done with this matter. I should be done soon. It's effective item 15 in a cause list which had 48 matters. Cause list that 48 matters. Mine was effectively item number 15, and just 15 of, in fact, 14 matters were heard, and 15th was kind of quickly taken up in the last 2 minutes, and the rest of all the matters were adjourned automatically later, and all of that is there. But that's what life is. Sometimes, and it happens so many times that 10 o'clock I go in, and all of a sudden 10:15 I'm free, and then I don't even know what to do, and then I call up friends and ask them. And this used to happen back in the day. Now I have associates, I have to kind of coordinate more, but back when I was a solo practitioner lawyer around 3 years ago, I mean, I am done with my work. I don't even have clients because not many people know me. I don't have many clients. I don't have much work. So at 10:30 in the morning, I'm calling up friends, and one guy says, "All right, come over, let's get drunk." So I'm going, and as a 27-year-old adult professional, I'm going and getting drunk in the middle of the day, literally at 11 a.m., 12 p.m. I'm going and getting drunk in the middle of the day, on that too on a weekday. I think all things considered, quite a good life. But then let me not portray such a rosy picture. There were days when I was working as an associate with somebody who was a big taskmaster, and most of my days were just spent running from court to court, arguing matters, then coming back, and then working till 2 in the night, 3 in the night, preparing for the next day's a bunch of matters, and then again going and doing this. And Sunday would be spent preparing for the whole week's matters and seeing whether there's something to be done or not. Quite crazy, quite hectic, but it's been a good run so far. Can't complain.
Yeah. So you said you have interns and junior, like associates also. So while hiring any intern or a junior lawyer, what you look out for in an application or an applicant?
I was telling somebody very recently, a huge problem with litigation lawyers is we don't really have a very formal hiring procedure. It's not that we do interviews. And even if we do interviews, I think we only do interviews because we want to kind of portray an image of us being professionals. Otherwise, nobody gives a damn, and everybody is afraid that, I don't know, who is this person? Is he going to be, a complete idiot? Or maybe he's going to be so smart that he's going to make me look like a fool in front of my clients. So, there are a lot of challenges that a lawyer who has associates and interns, who has to hire an associate, has to think about. Frankly, I think, so it's also, there are so many permutations and combinations involved. I remember when I hired my first associate, the guy was, I think he had worked somewhere else for a couple of months. He didn't like the work, so he left that place. Then he was applying for a couple of months, couldn't get anywhere. Then he applied to me, and then I hired him. And that was the first time I ever delegated work. I remember, otherwise I was the one to whom work would be delegated. And then the first time I delegated work, it was quite a bit of a relief for me, to be honest, because I absolutely hate, and everybody does hate, clerical work, right? Stuff like numbering the documents and then putting a tag through the file and then going and filing the matter, and just all sorts of time wasting things, which I was really glad I was able to kind of outsource to somebody else, who of course was learning the better things that that he would otherwise not learn. And since then, I think, so for me, I think, and that's why I say it's a little subjective. So when I take in people, there are a lot of running in my head. There is not just the capability of the person. There are several other factors. So for example, so right now all my associates are males, and someone, like a lot of people tell me, oh, so you make this content, which talks about how to help husbands and boyfriends with their situations. So you are a misogynist, and on top of that, they justify it by saying that you have an all male team, you don't even hire women. I say that's not the case. I say I have to kind of, irrespective of gender, I want somebody who lives near to my place. I don't want a man or a woman traveling several kilometers just to reach to me and then to go back several kilometers as well. That's one aspect. Then another aspect is by where are you from? Because if I'm paying you a stipend or a retainer, I like to definitely pay some amount. I don't keep anybody for free, but my problem is that I can't pay so much that I could cover someone's, you know at least in a metropolitan city like Delhi, I can't cover their rent, their food, their traveling expenses, because I mean that just goes through the roof, right? And so I would prefer that someone has their own house, at least in Delhi, so I can at least, I can easily cover their transport and their food, but at least I don't have to cover their crazy rent, which sometimes is, you know, almost as much as the retainer that I'm able to pay. And that's the case for all metropolitan cities. I'm sure you are also well aware of. But apart from that, when it comes to the meat of the matter, so how to actually, how I actually hire somebody, um, I think, I'm no expert. I've hired a few people. Some have stuck around, some have left, some I had to let go. And I think at the end of the day, for me, it's like, do I consider this person to be a family member or not? Or can I think of this person as a family member or not? Because I have to share, all my I have to share my life with this person. There have been so many occasions where my associates have walked in on me sleeping, catching a nap because I'm super tired. And then, I need to be comfortable with the person, because this person is going to see me in my t-shirt and shorts lying on the bed and snoring. And then this person is going to see me, venting out my frustration on a client by, and after cutting the call, I'll be like, देखो मतलब क्या पागल बच्चे हैं, so I really need to be comfortable around that person. That's one aspect. The other is that, loyalty, is one thing. You can't. There are a lot of. I think what it boils down to is whether I can be good friends or whether I consider that person as family or not. Everything else can be taken care of, right? Sometimes the person does not know good drafting. That's fine. They learn. Sometimes the person doesn't have good English. That's also fine. It's manageable. Sometimes the person, but a couple of things is, like the another thing is perhaps the dedication to the profession and to the fact that this is the only thing that I can do and I want to do, and I'm going to stick around. So for example, there are a couple of people who had joined me a couple of months ago, and you know for them, they would always come a little late, and they would always leave a little early, and that really didn't sit well with me. Everything else we could have worked on, but you know it just, and I told them on multiple occasions, but they would always, again, the thing, they lived a little far away, but they really insisted that they really wanted to work with me. And again, I said, this doesn't really, didn't last long, right? um and there are so many permutations and combinations, right? There's this one fellow who joined me who already had a few matters of his own, and I said, I'm completely fine with you doing your own matters when you're here with me. The only problem was that he was so focused on his matters that when I would give him any work to do, he would do a very bad job of it, and he would do it very hurried, and he would just give it to him because he had so much of his own work that he had to kind of go back again and again to his own work. So again, and to be honest, it's just been like a learning experience for me as well. It's not that I'm an expert that I could give any tips on how to go about doing this. It's a very personal kind of a thing. There have been occasions, I remember, a girl reached out to me on LinkedIn, and it's just the way the conversation happened, just 4 5 lines. I said, come join me. And she was a very bright girl, but she stuck around for only a month and a half. When the pandemic happened, her entire family packed up everything and went back to the village because they were very afraid of the coronavirus. So and she's still there. She hasn't even come back. And so there are all these like permutations and combinations, and I think nobody would really have an answer except maybe HR managers in law firms about who are good candidates and who aren't. But then again, litigation isn't so much about good employees. I think it's much more deeper than that. You have to have a deep sense of camaraderie. If you can't have it, good luck. You'll see your practice falling. In fact, I've seen a lot of times, partners, employees, bosses, things don't go well, and it becomes a disaster, and not fun. Yeah, not fun at all. So yeah, I mean, it's just I think it's an art, not a science. You got to figure your way out.
Yeah. Okay. So you have many matters in Supreme Court of India too. And you also work in lower courts, as you said, the district court and all. So there is this common, thing, the doubt in the mind of many lawyers. And many lawyers do join directly in the Supreme Court of India under some senior. So should one consider going directly there to the highest court and start practicing, like start their work there? Or one must consider, practicing for a few years in lower courts, district court, magistrate courts, or other like small courts and all, and then think of, going there. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. A lot of people have asked me this question, and I always give them my anecdotal experience, which I think could be valid on most situations as well. How I started working was I joined a prosecutor who had a lot of work in the district courts as well as the high court. Not much work in the Supreme Court though. And he assigned me all his matters in the high court. So I would run around from court to court inside the Delhi High Court, arguing matters on which he was the main counsel. Now, after I left him about 4.5 years ago, I suddenly realized that when you're a new young lawyer and you've gone independent, most people don't want to, get the matter done by a trial court lawyer and then bring it to you, a young solo practitioner lawyer in the high court. I realized all the clients coming my way were all coming in the district courts only. Yet it is not, when I was practicing with the senior, I never had any challenges with the Supreme Court or High Court procedure. I did have a challenge with trial court procedure because I was not doing any trial court work at all. But if you were to ask me, is there anything that, because the context of the question always is, if I am practicing directly at the High Court and the Supreme Court, is there anything that I wouldn't know which would lead to me losing the case in the High Court or the Supreme Court? That's the context that people ask in, right? So they say that, before coming to Supreme Court, you must do trial court work because you will not be able to win your Supreme Court case because you don't know anything about trial court work. That's the context with which people kind of talk about. But if I am, say, for example, but that's the thing. So when I started my own practice, I realized it's only, and that's the reason why that is only the trial courts. And that's the reason why I feel that, I'm assuming as a litigation lawyer or as someone who's aspiring to do litigation, you want to kind of have your own clients. And when you want to have your own clients, you need to know trial court work inside out. I did do High Court in the beginning years and the Supreme Court. I did not suffer in the High Court or the Supreme Court because of no knowledge of the trial court. But when I went solo, then yes, it suffered. So there are scenarios such as perhaps income tax law or writ jurisdiction, where the even if, say, I get a client who says that the government illegally demolished my property, then the remedy is to go to the High Court under the writ jurisdiction, and that is where we start. So you can get clients. The question is, if you don't get clients who have writ jurisdiction or tax appellate matters where you're going to the court, then what do you do? So for me, I got a lot of matrimonial matters, civil disputes, criminal cases. All of that was trial court work. And let me tell you, Prasanna, I did suffer for a good 1 year because I had not been around trial courts. I suffered tremendously. But once once I kept learning, I kept running around, and I kind of got the hang of it. And now it's the same, right? Now, when I have a decent holdover trial court practice and procedure, at least in Delhi, right? So if I go to Bangalore or Bombay or Chennai, I'll be completely clueless again. But I have an understanding of how the little nuances work. And then because of the fact that I've done a lot of High Court work and Supreme Court work, I can kind of do everything. But if someone asks me, I say for nothing else but only to only so that when you go independent, you are able to take up your own matters. Definitely do trial court work for a little bit. And I think, I think perhaps even the question is a little misplaced, because a lot of people ask this. But I think what you should focus on is, what kind of a career do you want to have for yourself, right? For example, I know people who say that I want to practice only tax law because that's what I find interesting. Then you have to kind of move in that direction. You might not have any experience or any matters, but you can always go and work with people who have those matters and that experience, and then while working with them, you will get opportunities of your own in that sphere. And I think that's what matters at the end of the day.
True. Okay, you have written a book, as mentioned before. Please tell us about that book, and how did this thought of writing a book come to you?
So the book was actually a necessity rather than like an inspiration. So what would happen was, I started getting a lot of matrimonial matters, and every time a husband would call me up and say that my wife has filed these cases against me, what do I do? There were also occasions where men would call me and say that I'm planning to get married, and I've heard that matrimonial laws in India are very, very scary. What should I know? And every time anyone would say this to me, I would launch into a 2-hour lecture about what all is there which is wrong or which is a little prejudiced towards men. And every single time I would just feel so exhausted by reciting this, because I would say, yeah, Abhi, 2 hours back I said the same exact thing to someone else. And literally I thought to myself, it's better to just kind of write this. And it's not even a book, it's like it's more of a 35, 36, 40 page booklet kind of a thing, but which, I'm very, very happy it was more of a necessity, because now if anyone says, what should I do or how should I just send them I just send them the link and I say, just like, this is the book. And I'm really happy, because a lot of times these potential clients will be like, oh sir, what do, like, read the book first and then you come back to me. And so majority of their questions are anyways answered, and then we can get down to the real meat of the matter about the way their situation is different than most other cases. So I'm really grateful for that. It does get me a lot of recognition as well. There have been a lot of occasions where, so the title of the book is 7 Things Men Should Know Before Getting Married. So a lot of women have reached out and said, we must point out that you've not written a book for women also, that they should know before getting married. So I plan to also write a book someday about things that women should know before they get married. But I think every woman knows the drawbacks of getting married, the patriarchal system, the issues and everything. So, but I think there are some interesting cases, some ways I've seen women get get into problems in their marriages and relationships, and hopefully I'll shed some light on that as well.
And as far as the legal point of view is concerned, it will be almost similar. Only the dowry prohibition thing will be included, I think, right?
Oh, no. So whenever a husband asks me, and again, Prasanna, I'll have to send you a link to the book as well.
Sure. We'll go through it.
It's I always call it a package deal, right? It's 498A, 406, the criminal matters, and there is domestic violence petitions, the civil remedies which are there in the Domestic Violence Act. Then there is maintenance under Section 125 CRPC, and there's also maintenance under the DV Act. There's also maintenance under the Hindu Marriage Act, and alimony, permanent alimony as well. There's child custody. There is all sorts of false implications. There are a million things to so husbands, not so simple, but the kind of remedies that I've been suggesting to husbands in the past couple of months, now I'm sure I could now I have things to talk about for that women can do to kind of protect themselves as well. But that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, sure. We'll have another episode if
yeah.
Okay. So starting out and maintaining an independent practice is quite difficult, as we all know. What message would you like to share with young advocates planning to go independent? And what mistakes do you think most of the young lawyers make related to like getting clients?
I think the message that I would like to convey is, when you are going independent, don't think about how you don't have any matters right now, or you have that 1 or 2 matters and you are sitting idle for a long time. I say make the most of it, because that's the sweetest spot where you are getting much more money than what your retainer was with your senior, and you also have so much time, free time on your hands. And so, as I mentioned before, you could call me a degenerate for getting drunk at 11 a.m. after I'm done with my matters. But let me tell you, if you are like me, who has, having a little fun and enjoying your life a little as well, it's the best time, because the more your practice grows, the more work comes to you, the less time you will have to yourself. So enjoy yourself to the best possible extent when you go independent. And when you talk about acquiring clients, I think the one of the best things you can do is to follow your passions in the law. So for me, I think I have seen this happen quite a bit. Whenever I have an interest in something, I delve deeply into it. I ask myself questions on it. I keep researching on it, and inevitably, I'll also start talking about it. I'll talk about it in videos, articles. I'll talk about it with my friends and family. And I've seen it happen often that just because I'm talking about it, people will say, "Oh, that's a problem for me as well," and then they come and hire me for that thing. I think a genuine inquisitiveness about the law really helps. So
Hmm.
to sum it up, party hard and be as inquisitive as possible, and just kind of keep following your curiousness, your inquisitiveness for the various spheres of law that you are interested in.
Okay, that's an interesting advice. Okay. So coming to the last question, please share an incident from your career which is very memorable to you.
Oh man, there's like so much that happens on such a regular
I was
basis, right?
expecting this.
Yeah, it's so overwhelming, so overwhelming. I think rather than sharing an experience, it would be, I think, a culmination of a lot of experiences would be that, you know, it's all the uncertainty
Hmm.
is amazing and awful at the same time. So many incidents come to my mind, small incidents, but which at that moment have such a huge impact, you know lead to such emotional this thing that I remember. There was this one case I had fought it for a relative of mine, right? A small case before the National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. And I argued the matter, and the judge was not even inclined to issue notice. And I kept insisting. The judge said, no, 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 no. I said, all right, fine. So I keep making my submissions. The judge says, no, no, no. You find out the order later. I am reserving it for orders. And he had made it abundantly clear that he is not going to, entertain the matter. He's going to dismiss the petition. So I get out and I call up my relative and I say that this is done. It's not going to happen. And they were quite a bit of a sport about it. It's all right. You just file an SLP also for us once, and whatever happens, it doesn't matter. I said, all right. I'm thankful that they don't, because they just lost a matter which they've been contesting for the past 15 years. And then I'm waiting, and then the relative keeps asking, "Did you get the order?" And I keep checking, and I don't get the copy of the order. 3 months later, matter which has been reserved, 3 months later, the order is uploaded when I check it again. And the order says, issue notice, stay on the order of the trial court, of the courts below. And I'm like, I said, what the hell happened? This judge was clearly not inclined, and he issues notice now. And there have been several, many more occasions. I remember, of course, whenever you are discussing a matter with somebody, and they say, no, you are wrong, and then you turn out to be right, it's an amazing feeling, right? It's not, see, it's that uh, you have some big wins, you have some great losses. Some cases are unwinnable, so you know that you are going to lose anyways, but you're giving it your best. So when you lose, you're not that upset. Some cases are so good and so huge, but you get that win, and you know that the client was anyway supposed to get it, so it's not a big deal anyways. I think the clinchers are the cases where you feel that very low possibility of winning, yet you come out emerging winning. And then that's why I say amazing and awful at the same time, because and in the flip side, Prasanna, there'll be cases where I'm thinking it's a short deal, it's a short done thing. And then I see that thing just does not happen like that. And it becomes a complete nightmare. So, you know, many occasions, this is just a small this thing, I um one thing that I'm kind of like really proud of is the fact that I filed a PIL, notice was issued, I got my name mentioned on the second page of the Hindu of all papers. That was a beautiful feeling. Now again, great thing that a PIL notice was issued, very, very nice. Now, talk about 2 years from then, and it's a very good cause. I won't go into a lengthy topic, but because of the pandemic, stand still. So again, there are a lot of occasions where you feel you should be happy. So another lesson out of to wean out of it is, no matter what kind of win you have, or no matter what kind of a loss you have, just maintain your stoicism. Doesn't matter. Don't feel happy when you win. Don't feel sad when you lose, because this is just a part of the game in the long run. I've of course, I mean, we win and we lose all the time. Whenever I win, I try to hold myself back and I say, don't celebrate, don't go mad, because one, there is another appeal lying just around the corner anyways. That's one aspect. Second is, that there is another loss. If you won this, there is another loss
coming your way,
right around the corner. Yes. And the more happy you feel right now because of this win, the more sad you will feel because of the loss. And when I feel sad, or when I feel that my client has not been given a fair hand, or I feel that the judge was extremely mean, or the judge was not good, this one occasion I remember, I went up to my one of my relatives who was also a lawyer, and I said, this absurd judge of the High Court can't even imagine this kind of a stupid order he has passed. And this relative says, it's all right. Today he passed it against you. Tomorrow you take this judge's, you keep this judge's judgment in your file of absurd judgments. And maybe 1 year or 10 years down the line, you quote this constitutional court's judgment in your favor, maybe 10 years down the line. And, these kind of absurd judges, they will pass their absurd orders, but they will set a precedent which you will be able to get some benefit out of maybe 5 or 10 years down the line when you're on the other side of the arguing spectrum. That's a good point.
Yeah,
that was a very good point. So, memories are of course plenty, but I guess, as long as this thing keeps going, the only thing we look forward to, or the only thing we kind of think of is the future glories, right? Arguing before those bigger benches, getting that. And in fact, another thing I would say is, I asked my father, this was also a lawyer, I asked him, which was the happiest moment or the most memorable moment of your life? He said, this moment right now. This moment that I'm sitting in right now is the most memorable and the most happiest moment of my life, because, life keeps on going, right? You have successes, you have failures, doesn't matter, right? And it was not as if he won some trophy and he was running around. And then I asked him, we were traveling from somewhere, he's sitting in the car, just looking on his dial list, who has to call and who else called him. And he said, yeah, this is the moment. And I think that's what it is. As long as you're overall happy, as long as you can, on most days, sleep well at night, I think it's a win. I think it's, couldn't ask for more.
Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, Amish.
It was a pleasure, Prasanna.
And thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you like this episode, then you must also check out our other episodes available here and follow us here so that you don't miss out a new episode. Thank you.